Straight on to the business news now, and Brian Quinn is joining me here on set from the business desk. He's starting in Greece today. That landslide victory for Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis. The Greek economy figuring pretty heavily, do you think, Brian, in voters' decisions?
I would say so, Stuart. Greek voters are still very much feeling the effects of the country's sovereign debt crisis, which, of course, came on the heels of the 2008 global financial crisis. That meltdown devastated the Greek economy for a decade, with much of the country's youth emigrating abroad to seek better opportunities. Household incomes fell by 1/3. Hundreds of thousands of businesses went under, and unemployment went through the roof as the country came very close to actually exiting the Eurozone. Years later, Greece still carries the highest debt burden in the EU, and it remains the bloc's second poorest country after Bulgaria. But Prime Minister Mitsotakis has managed to kickstart growth that's currently running at twice the Eurozone average. Companies are investing there. The government is paying down its debt ahead of schedule. Greece, though, still facing a cost of living crisis, driven in particular by skyrocketing rents. Many voters, though, say economic stability was top of their minds as they cast their ballots. Take a listen here.
I want the government to do what it hasn't done for the previous 4 years. Things that will benefit the youth, that will encourage the youth not to leave abroad, and generally things that will benefit the young generation here.
I expect a lot. The main thing is the health system and the economy so we can live better, because things are difficult. I'm a pensioner. I was in a fire brigade, and now I don't have a dime. In general, we want our lives to get better and for our children to find jobs and stay in Greece.
Turning to the markets next, Asian indexes mostly losing ground on Monday amid investor concern over the weekend's aborted revolt by the Wagner Group in Russia. Mitsubishi UFJ shares are down around 1% in Tokyo after the group announced plans to buy the Indonesian auto loan company Mandala for $467 million. The Nikkei overall down around 0.25%. Hong Kong and Shanghai deeper in the red as stocks fall there on weak tourism data following China's 3-day Dragon Boat Festival. The Kospi in Seoul up around 0.5% just ahead of the closing bell. Here in Europe, major indexes fairly flat in early trade after larger than expected interest rate hikes in the UK, Norway, and Switzerland last week. Oil and gas shares, though, are rising along with crude prices as traders look at that turmoil in Russia as a potential supply disruptor. Many investors, meanwhile, are bracing for more interest rate hikes from central banks. Earlier, France 24 spoke with markets analyst Han Tan about the week to come.
This week, the ECB is holding a forum featuring speeches from the heads of these major central banks. So markets are eager to find out what's the latest signals for the policy outlooks for the likes of the US, the UK, the Eurozone, and even Japan. And then also later this week, we have got some inflation data out of Germany and the Eurozone. So if we see an uptick in these CPI numbers, I think that could translate into a stronger euro, but perhaps more pain ahead over the near term for risk assets such as stocks.
Next, the Hajj, of course, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, with Muslim faithful expected to complete the pilgrimage at least once in their lives. For many would-be pilgrims, though, the journey is increasingly out of reach. With inflation around the world running at its highest rate in decades, the cost of travel and accommodations has grown less and less affordable. Nick Rushworth reports.
Pilgrims in Cairo boarded buses a few days ago for the long journey to Mecca. They did so with Egypt's economy reeling from years of government austerity and the consequences of the COVID pandemic and war in Ukraine. That's prompted many worshippers to choose the longer but cheaper route by land rather than travel by plane.
I heard that a flight package would cost 175,000 Egyptian pounds, around $5,645. So I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford that. But when I found out that going by land costs 130,000 pounds, I decided that even if it involves more effort, it's not a problem.
A foreign currency shortage has been a challenge for pilgrims and for tour operators. Most of Egypt's banks have placed limits on foreign cash withdrawals and expenditure. Added to that, the Egyptian currency is weaker.
Of course, the price surge in Hajj tourism compared to previous years has taken place for many reasons. The increase of the Saudi rial to the Egyptian pound has been one of the causes.
Inflation rose to 40.3% in Egypt in May, reducing the value of the savings many pilgrims make for years to be able to go to Saudi Arabia.
Finally, for business, a new report from a key energy industry trade group shows rising demand as fossil fuels continue to dominate over renewable sources. The UK-based Energy Institute says global energy demand rose by 1% in 2022, with fossil fuels accounting for fully 82% of supply. Overall demand was up 3% from pre-COVID levels. Renewable energy supply did see its largest growth ever last year, gaining some 266 gigawatts, led mostly by solar power. But with demand on the rise amid a continued dominance of oil, gas, and coal, energy-related greenhouse gas emissions rose once again by 0.8%. Scientists say the world needs to cut emissions by 43% by the end of the decade to have any chance of keeping global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So obviously still very far from that target.
Yeah,
So
little,
hard to see how it's going to get there.
little way to go. Very depressing. Thanks, Brian. Brian Quinn there with the business news for us today.